Hey guys, Thunder E here and welcome back to another gaming video. This time we're taking a look at the S25 and the S25 Plus to find out how they perform, especially with the brand new Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset. So without wasting any more time, let's jump in. The S25 and S25 Plus should not be left out from the Galaxy S25 line launch. Now, Samsung really pushed the Ultra. That's the first device we got. We finally have our hands on the Plus and the regular S25, and they kind of look the same, although the feel is a little bit different in some ways. Now, the S25 feels much smaller to me, at least just in terms of size. It feels very comfortable, but also feels like a really small phone. The smaller bezel footprint is very apparent, which is pretty nice, within the same housing form factor in terms of size. Now, the Plus feels like the device that I would use if I wasn't using the Ultra. I do like the size, and again, the smaller bezels really showcase quite well. And as you can see, in terms of visuals, the wallpapers look absolutely fantastic there with Grimjaw and Renji. So of course, as you know, my Bleach fans, I have to showcase some of the wallpapers. And if you're looking for any of these wallpapers, use the link down below in my description. So this is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset. You do have 12 gigabytes of RAM across the board, which is pretty nice. And of course, you have storage that does start at 128 on the smaller S25 and then moves all the way up. Now, in terms of cooling, Samsung did not mention if the S25 and S25 Plus have the extra 40% cooling, or if also has the TIM layer as well. So we don't know that, but we do know it does have vapor chamber built into that. So a typical fashion, we want to run some benchmarks and we also want to look at some gameplay. Now, you're probably thinking the benchmark should still be the same because it's the same processor. Well, not really. It's got a different battery and also different screen size as well. So those numbers will change in different avenues. So let's take a look at our CPU scores in Geekbench, starting with the S25, where we're getting a single core of 2,763 and a multi-core score of 9,393, which is actually not bad, but I wish that was at 3,000, while the S25 Plus has a single core of 3,105 and a multi-core of 9,906, so much better and also closely in line to the Ultra. Now, when we look at GPU scores, starting with the S25, we've got 17,736, which is much lower than expected compared to the 19,375 for the S25 Plus, which is closely in line again to the Ultra. And then we move over to the 3D Mark scores. Looking at Solar Bay is 9,704 on the S25, while on the Ultra is 11,916, which is the one was kind of maxed out on the Ultra. While Wildlife Extreme, you're looking at 5,647 on the S25. S25 Plus, we're looking at 6,207. So we have seen different scores here, still high numbers, but different from what we got from the Ultra, which means there are different factors at play. So what does that mean for your gaming experience? And what does that mean for gaming in general? So starting off with our typical games we love to play, Call of Duty Mobile. I know a lot of you are like, it's not a game to test, but it's a good parameter to check because the numbers are not the same in terms of benchmarks. S25 plays well, really smooth gameplay, and at its max settings, you're getting 120 frames per second on the S25, which is nice. Now we'll move over to the S25 Plus. Same max settings, smooth gameplay, as you can clearly see. You're doing 120 frames per second here as well with Call of Duty Mobile. So both of them, while gaming, you get a really good experience overall, which is nice. Now we move over to PUBG Mobile, where on the S25, we're at the max settings for high FPS. And here again, seeing some really smooth gameplay and getting 120 frames per second. So PUBG Mobile still lifts the task for the S25. And then we move to the S25 Plus, same high FPS settings, we're getting smooth gameplay and 120 frames per second, like 190. You get the idea. So good gameplay across the board for PUBG. Now we have 3 other games in our list, and also this is where temperatures we begin to check. So let's move to Genshin Impact. I did see a comment in my video that said Genshin is a game that is now well stabilized with a lot of chipsets from 3 years ago, which is true, except the longevity. With the Snapdragon 8 Elite, if you're playing up to 30 minutes or more, you're going to get steady 60 frames per second on Genshin. And it shows on both devices. What you're going to see on the S25 is 60 frames per second, all the way solid, max settings on the S25, smooth gameplay, which is nice. And then on the S25 Plus, again, 60 frames per second at these same settings. So really solid here, but the temperatures start moving up. And we see that in Call of Duty Warzone. Warzone here, when just looking at temperatures, first of all, Warzone, we're getting about 110 on the S25, while the S25 Plus, we're getting about 115, which is also 42 degrees Celsius or 45, 46 for the Plus. So higher temperatures in general while playing Call of Duty Warzone. Now, when it comes to gameplay and performance, this is where it got interesting. The S25, playing Call of Duty Warzone, getting about 39 frames per second, 40 highest settings on there, which was quite interesting to see that it dropped down to that mic. Now, when we went ahead and played the same game, Call of Duty Warzone, on the S25 Plus, it actually started at a lower number, same 39 frames per second. Then it went up to 60 frames per second. So you can see the final medium benchmark was about 59, 60 frames per second on the S25 Plus. So which means it is quite possible to play at 60 FPS with Call of Duty Warzone on a Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset. But again, something's off because the temperatures are also at the highest, and also things were not optimized. And we know this is a very GPU heavy game. So we have all that mixed into the back. So that was that. Now, I did add one more game. A lot of you commented that I should add a new game, especially a game called War Thunder, which is a tank game and has some really nice high FPS settings, 120 frames per second for that kind of performance. So I went ahead and I set that up on both devices, and playing at the max settings on the S25, I was able to get about 89 frames per second playing War Thunder, which is nice, but it's not 120 frames per second. It did go high to 120 and gradually started coming down, so that's something to take note. And then on the S25 Plus, it started at 120 frames per second and dropped down to about 109, 110 frames, which is really good. So the Plus, again, you can see the highest size of performance, especially with games like War Thunder and, of course, Call of Duty Warzone. So nice performance there, and the temperatures were also still kind of high at this point, which is fair. Now, when it comes to audio from gameplay, how well does it sound? You've seen our speaker test where we actually showcase speaker test fully. If you haven't watched that, go ahead and watch that video now. But if you want to hear the gameplay itself, take a listen to gameplay for both S25 and S25 Plus.
Reloading, cover me. Changing mag, cover me. Contact with enemy. How's this? That tingle? Yeah, cross. Friendly loadout drop on the way. Down. Changing mag.
AV recon is standing by. Ready on. Taking the lead.
juice.
So yeah, sounds really good, rich sound, especially when you're gaming, which is nice. You've also got Dolby Atmos, which can be tuned for game selection. So that's also a great thing. So when you look at the S25 and S25 Plus, they can play the games you want to play. This chipset is quite capable. The temperatures do rise for games like Warzone, which is known to have issues, and also for a game like War Thunder, which just is very intensive. I don't know about the increase in vapor chamber layers, if that is something that's applied to these two devices. I will tell you that I do like the performance and I do like the gameplay experience on the S25 Plus more than the S25. The S25 is too small, felt a little cramped. As you can see, my fingers feel cramped on the screen compared to the S25, which just has a larger screen area. But it's your choice. Which of these two devices would you pick to game? Or do you care to game at all? Or would you prefer to game on something else? I want to know your thoughts. If you have any questions, any comments, let me know. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and always enjoy entertainment. Good night, folks.